Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be, and welcome everybody to the final retro listening viewing party. Today, we will be viewing and hearing the sights and sounds of the first full expansion that we ever released. It was actually ever released either for both the physical game and the video game. You all know it as Rook City. If you are new, you might be asking yourself, what exactly is a listening viewing party? Well, I'll tell you a little story. Around the time that we were about to release Infernal Relics, Jean-Marc, you can give a little wave now.
Oh, right, I'm on camera. I forgot.
I told you we went live. Yeah, he's not used to being on camera. We only just started the on-camera stuff a couple weeks ago, and he has not been on one yet. So anyway, Jean-Marc came to me and presented this idea of highlighting the music unhindered by the sounds that you usually hear in the game, like sound effects, damage dealing, card shuffling, etc., etc. It was too late to do it for that expansion, but we then planned ahead when it came time for Shattered Timelines, and we held our first live listening party for that expansion. We then did the same for Wrath of the Cosmos, and the format was a big hit. So we plan to continue to do so with all the future expansions, but of course, we had missed a couple. So what about the music that was already released? And that brings us to today. Hello everybody, you are watching Handelabra Games, and if you enjoy the show, please do like, share, follow, and subscribe. You can follow us at Handelabra on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, as well as Handelabra Games here on Twitch. We do host a show here on Twitch every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern called Sentinels Live, where we hang out, play Sentinels, and often preview new content. But I also did want to mention that this week we are launching 2 new shows on our channel. Thursday evenings at 7 Eastern, join community member LewdDolphin, aka Mark, for Dolphin's Dive for a deep analysis of strategy in Sentinels. And then on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, check out Tales from the Archive, featuring Denonczd, aka Samwise, aka Zach, who is going to be holding a Sentinels story time with thematic games played for a maximum of storytelling goodness. This here is a special episode which was achieved as part of our Season 2 Kickstarter last year. As we were working our way towards our final goal, we came up with some interim squish goals, little squishies, for the community, the last of which comes to fruition today. Right after the Kickstarter, we held the mini-pack party covering mini-packs 1 and 3. Then when we officially launched Season 2 with the preview pack, we had a combination preview pack Infernal Relics listening party. And then on our second anniversary, we held the party for the core game, which left us with just Rook City left to be given the official treatment. And so I guess without further ado, we're going to get started. Joining me today, as always, is our in-house maestro, Jean-Marc. Say hello, Jean-Marc.
Hello, everyone.
And of course, we've got our environmental artist, which is only one of the many things that she does for us. But that's Jennifer Green. Say hi, Jennifer.
Hey, everybody.
They will definitely get around to introducing themselves more later as we talk through some other of the cool stuff that's going on. But first, let's maybe set the scene. So the concept I had when it came time to market the first full expansion of the video game was to go in a slightly different direction than we had with the initial release. And in fact, I'm wearing my OG Rook City t-shirt here, everybody can see. I actually got this shirt when we first met the Great Games team when they were kickstarting the very first expansion, Rook City. So anyway, so the trailer for the core game was basically Baron Blade calling out the heroes, Legacy sort of in particular, and it was setting the scene for what was to come. With Rook City, most of you who are familiar know that it is a darker, harder, and more noir take on the multiverse. Where Megalopolis is the big, bright, bustling metropolis, Rook City is the corrupt, polluted criminal haven where even the cops are on the take. The obvious choice, of course, was to lean into the darkness, but I thought, in my infinite wisdom, what if we went a different direction? The centerpiece of what was formerly known as Overbrook City is, of course, Pike Industries. Those of you who have listened to the Chairman episode of the Letters page know that Pike is far from a purely criminal enterprise. It is a thriving business with real employees doing real legitimate work, but then there's always this undercurrent of nefariousness. So the concept was born, what if we showed a dated orientation film for new employees? As always, the script was written in conjunction with Christopher and Adam. We worked to give a quick nod to all the villainous elements of the expansion. Spite, Plague Rat, and the Matriarch are all hinted at, but the tone is very up. You are joining a company that really will make a difference. It's just maybe not the difference that you were expecting. So allow me to be the first to welcome you to your first day at Pike Industries.
Pike Industries has its eye on the future, and now you're part of the action. For our founder, Jonathan Pike, industry had no limits. He truly believed that through the application of science and technology, the human experience could be improved beyond measure. You never know what the next breakthrough will be. One of our most successful stimulants began as a simple animal feed supplement. Now, we make use of helpers in all of our testing, just like this little rat. Careful there, little fella, our future is in your paws! And through our partnership with the Overbrook Penitentiary, we find new ways to rehabilitate the criminal element, most of whom are just misunderstood and looking forward to renewing their lives on the beautiful streets of Overbrook City. Our current CEO, Graham Pike, is the son of Pike Industries' founder. He is driven but reclusive, never showing his face outside the tower at the heart of the Pike Industrial Complex. Can any other company claim such a dedicated leader? We don't think so. No matter what division you are joining, we know you'll find your time here rewarding, and we welcome you to the Pike Industries team. With your help, the world will never be the same.
That didn't work the way I wanted to. Let's get that out of the way. There we go. All right. So yes. So that is that. Some of you might notice a somewhat Dharma Initiative feel for the trailer. That was definitely one of my influences putting it together. And Jean-Marc actually asked here, he's like, so what's the Dharma Initiative? And I realized that not everybody maybe has watched Lost, but that was a thing from Lost. If you want to know more about what the Dharma Initiative, you should just go to the Wikipedia page and dive into the Lost hole, because that's really pretty nuts. So now that you have joined the team here at Pike Industries, let's give you a quick tour around Rook City. Your tour guides on this trip, of course, are Jennifer and Jean-Marc. Jennifer, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about what you do here at Handelabra.
All right. Well, I'm Jennifer. I build the environments. I also do I do use UI design and the mock-ups, like when we're, for making new games, and some programming, and whatever else needs to get done too.
Right on.
Yeah, I think the environments are probably my favorite thing.
Nice. And we'll hear some about each of the environments that you helped build as we go further on. And of course, you know him, you love him, Jean-Marc, who will introduce himself now, and then we'll begin our journey. So why don't you go ahead and take it away, Jean-Marc.
Okay, hi, I'm jean-marc Giffen. I've been working at Handelabra now with Jennifer for 3 years. I spent most of it doing the engine for Sentinels, initially with John, but then it was sort of the main area I took care of. But I've also been doing the music for Sentinels since the beginning, and that's part of why we're here today. And so this is Rook City, as you know, and it's the first major expansion since the core game, both on the tabletop, and we're doing the digital expansions in the same order. So this was the first major expansion we did for Sentinels a couple of years ago now. So as you can see, the whole expansion has a very dark tone to it, especially compared to the original. And so we actually had to get pretty much a whole new set of virtual instruments for me to use to compose the music for this one, because most of what I had I only got sort of as I needed it, and the original core game didn't require most of the tones that Rook City has, so we got a whole new set for that. And interesting for me was that during this time, It was the middle of winter. There were huge snowstorms here in Halifax, so it was keeping people indoors a lot. But I had to still go work at a friend's house since we just had a child and there wasn't enough space at our apartment for me to work like in a quiet environment. So, but because it was shorter days, it would often be dark when I'd go to work and dark when I'd come home. And because I was working in my friend's basement, it was also dark in there with almost no sunlight. So maybe that's how I had the inspiration to make the music sound dark as well. But it just felt like an unusually dark point in my life, even though like nothing actually was like bad was going on. We just had a kid, so it was actually a great time, but it was just this weird sort of matchup of situations. So all right, so without going too much further, let's get into the first piece of music. So the first piece of music we're going to play is an environment song. It's Rook City. So originally, Overbrook City was founded in the mid-1800s as a port town. The Gothic architecture and the grim parlor of the city resulted in the city being referred to as Rook City in the local paper, and that name stuck. It now has the highest crime rate of any city in the world. Street thugs, organized crimes, filthy streets, and putrid sewers make Rook City the exact opposite of a tourist attraction.
Yeah, in fact, I think I remember it must have been the Chairman episode when they were talking about Rook City and its crime rate, they said that it likely has a crime rate that's equal to the other top 3 cities' crime rates combined. Like they said, it's not quite more than the top 10, but it's definitely more than the next 3, for sure. So, very bad place.
So let's give a listen to Rook City now.
right, so that was Rook City.
So would you like me to talk about the music, or would you like Jennifer to talk about the environments first?
Why don't you do your little outro, and then we can sort of freestyle it.
Sure. So when deciding how to approach the Rook City music, we took the mantra of bad jazz. So the music had to mix sort of the dark grittiness of the crime in the city with the celebration of those at the top who benefit most from that corruption. So the first thing we created was for the trailer, musically speaking, and we just wanted to have like lone saxophone playing in the rain, which led to sort of initial opening, which kind of became the central theme for the whole music. And on the last note of the saxophone in the intro, like right at the very last note that it hits, you know, like the toll of a broken bell and this dark bass play, and then police sirens going by, and you just like basically the world of the corrupt city opens up to you, and then just kind of expanded upon for the rest of the piece. So during the whole piece, you were either hearing music from, you know, the clubs of the streets or in this den of iniquity, or you're hearing the streets themselves and the perpetual rain going on. And at the very end of the piece, you hear a bell ringing out, reminding us of the man at the top who's in charge of it all from the shadows.
Indeed.
So,
all right, so Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of how you approach, I mean, maybe do a quick overview for anyone who's new about how you approach this environment in general, and then maybe you could talk about some of the challenges particular to this one.
Sure. Well, this one, well, the general approach to when we build environments is I take a look at the card art, talk to Greater Than Games about if they have, what their vision for the environment is, and then start working on it. And, sometimes we get asset packs with some pre-made assets. Sometimes I make custom assets, and then go from there, depending on what the environment is and what it look like. So for Rook City and Pike Industrial Complex, they were kind of in the same universe. And we actually built both of them in the same project, which is the only environments we did that for. And because it was also one of the earlier environments they built, it's actually, there's a fair amount of particle systems and things that are animated in the environment, which you can kind of see in the trailer for Rook City. The other thing is when we built when we updated all the environments for Vengeance, I went back and added 5 new cameras in every environment. So that was a neat experience with Rook City, because I could go back and add the things that I didn't get a chance to add in the first time. Right. One thing was like the pool hall, Dr. Tremont lab, and if you can look through and see some references to card art that are in there that weren't there originally. And then the crazy weather.
Right. Yeah, and actually one of the things I was really excited about was when it came time to cut together these items for the listening party, which they've kind of evolved over time as I've gotten more and more into creating stuff for these, because I actually really out of it. Jennifer went back and captured really high-res shots from all the various cameras, but then she also added in some of the environmental effects. So you saw some of them have rain in them, some of them have fog in them, and then so I was able to sort of cut them together and then actually add some real animated rain over top of it in Final Cut, just to really give you that dank and dreary feel to it, which I thought was really a lot of fun. Also, I did want to mention to everyone in the chat, if you have any specific questions for either Jennifer or Jean-Marc, just mention Handelabra Games, or I see that Jean-Marc is in there. Jen, are you in the chat as well? Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the chat.
Cartoon Jen, right?
Yep.
All right, so yeah, at Jean-Marc, at Cartoon Jen, at Handelabra Games, and we will try to answer them. You can actually ask during the songs, and we will try to answer them sort of afterward, if we can. All right, so that was Rook City, sort of setting the stage of where we are. And you notice at the end of that, we zoomed into a tower, which is at the heart of not only Rook City, but also the Pike Industrial Complex. And that's where a certain someone hangs out. Why don't you tell us about him, Jean-Marc?
Sure. So Rook City inhabitants complain about terrible crime rates, but few are aware that a single organization led by a shadowy figure known only as the chairman is responsible for the vast majority of Rook City's corruption. Few have ever seen him, but most have suffered the brunt of his reign. Let's listen to the chairman's theme now.
Hey everybody, sorry, Game Show, something weird is going on with Game Show and it was making the music skip. So I'm gonna quit out of a bunch of other apps that I don't need to have going, and then we're gonna start that one again. I'm not really sure what happened. It was happening to the behind the scenes music, the Time Cataclysm, while we're talking too, and I'm not sure why that's happening. So I will see if I can't maybe quit out of Twitter too. Twitter tends to be kind of a resource hog. All right, let's try this one more time. So back to the chairman. Sorry for the difficulties.
Yay!
All right, and we're back. Yes, a couple of people in the chat are talking about the fact that in the artwork here, he has both his pinky fingers, which if you've listened to the letters page, you know is probably not right. I think you guys should immediately tweet at Adam and let him know that he messed that up. I'm sure he will super appreciate it. All right, so tell us a little bit about your process on this one, Jean-Marc.
Sure. So unlike most of the villain themes up to the point that this was composed, the chairman's theme is much, much slower. if you try and pick up on the tempo, it's like whereas most of the other ones are more at a walking pace. And this is because the chairman is more methodical and calculating, hides in the shadows. It's not about being seen and heard. So especially at the beginning, you just kind of hear the ominous drums and finger snaps and stomps. And this sort of represents the people he has control over and matches the overall bad jazz feel of the city. And as sort of a trivia note, at the end of the piece there, I originally had some saxophone in there towards the end to try and match it up even more with the Rook City feel. But Greater Than Games didn't really like it because it made him sound too suave, or swanky, and they said that he definitely isn't that. So I ended up replacing it with the bell chimes at the end, which are much more ominous. And then I actually went back to the Rook City theme and put the bells at the end of that theme. So I kind of went backwards to make things match up.
Yeah, and that gives you actually another little peek behind the curtain of sort of how we work with Greater Than Games on these themes, because we've covered it at some of the other listening parties, but again, for anyone who's new, basically what happens is for each character and in each environment, Jean-Marc goes to Christopher and Adam and says, all right, so give me some reference points, give me some concepts, what do you think of when you think about this villain or this environment or whatever, and they give him some ideas. Then he goes and sort of comes up with some stuff. He goes into the magic box and comes up with some samples, sends them over to Greater Than Games. They give it a quick listen. They'll sort of be like, yeah, this is close but not quite, or you should change this a little bit to that thing or whatever. And they just sort of mess with it a bit until it arrives at what they think really reflects what that character or that environment is all about. It's actually, I think it's a pretty interesting process. It's very rare that we have something that they don't immediately just go, yep, that's right. But sometimes when we do, it becomes a much more back and forth. Like I know there have been a couple situations already with the Villains of the Multiverse songs that they've had some really specific ideas but have maybe had a hard time verbalizing them. So Jean-Marc is like, well, what about this? And like, no, maybe a little bit more angry. And like, okay, well, what about this? And so they kind of go back and forth, which is, I don't know if that's frustrating or fun or what it is for Jean-Marc, but it's fun to watch. I know that much.
Yeah, I don't take any of the suggestions or criticisms personally. Like, you're criticizing my music. What have you done? I mean, I don't know. Some composers take the approach of like, I just do what I want, and if people like it, that's great, and if they don't, well, I'm doing it for myself. But I mean, especially when you're doing music that is supposed to represent something or someone. I feel like that is the measuring stick at which, you've reached where it should be, is that, like, if it does sound like it represents that thing, that to me is the goal. And, there are some pieces that I've done in Sentinels that they aren't my favorite stylistically or anything, but like they felt and I felt that represented the character, and so at the end of the day, I'm happy to make changes that lean towards that goal.
Yeah, in the chat they're saying, Christopher and Adam making music with you. Christopher and Adam. That's again from the letters page. If you're not listening to the letters page, you should be. All right, what do we got next, Jean-Marc?
All right, so next up we've got Plague Rat. So decades ago, a foul drug dealer controlled Rook City's drug market. His hideout was deep in Rook City sewers, keeping his stash safe. However, new criminal organizations took control of the city, and he was ousted from the streets. He lived in the sewers to survive, and a mixture of drugs and industrial toxic waste slowly mutated the dealer into a giant, hideous rat-like monster. Now he takes the Rook City sewers in search of his next meal, infecting all he touches. So let's listen to Plague Rat now.
So that was the Plague Rat.
So this is the first, and so far only, villain theme without any type of discernible melody or rhythm or beat or anything like that to it. When we asked Greater Than Games what they wanted from Plague Rat's theme, they said just dark ambient sewers and things like that. So you'll notice it feels like it's in the space of a sewer, with the sounds of mice and rats and drums and sewage and stuff like that. But overall, the reaction to this one from most people is sort of like, okay, yeah, it sounds about right. So sometimes I feel like there could have been more to it, but again, we passed by Greater Than Games, and they were just kind of like, "Yep, that's pretty much it." So, it is what it is.
Indeed. Yeah, it's so non-musical, but it is so exactly right. There is a question in the chat: will the villain's theme for Plague Rat end up being similar to this? Why don't you speak to that for a second?
Yeah. So, when we started working on villains, I forget how long ago, we had a meeting with Greater Than Games about the music, as we usually do, and we just kind of blasted through each of the villains, because there's 10 in the next expansion, for those who don't know, and normally we have 4. So that was a lot to go through all in one sitting. But we did. And then we arrived at Plague Rat, and I was like, well, I guess if you're not familiar with the way that the villain team victory music works, there's actually just one villain team theme, and each different villain has a different version of that theme. So there's going to be a total of 15 different arrangements of the same piece of music. But when you lose to these villains, it makes an on-the-fly mix of this arrangement based on the characters that are in your team. So I was kind of curious how we were going to take what you just heard and in any way make it compatible with the villain team victory music. And they said, well, you could probably lean more into the RevoCorp side of things for that one, because in villains, he's been captured by RevoCorp and is now a part of their experimentation. So they said, maybe using that as more of the angle for the theme might work out. So stay tuned, because that part isn't done yet.
Yeah, some of the other villain theme themes are coming along, and so we've heard bits and pieces of some of them, and it's definitely really fun, because obviously when we did Vengeance, hearing Baron Blade's song and then sort of hearing the Ermine version of it and the Fright Train version of it, and then hearing them all mixed together was really cool, and knowing that now there's going to be literally 3 times as many songs to mix together in interesting ways is going to be really fun, I have a feeling. So cool. All right, anything else to say about Plague Rat, or are we ready to move on to the next one?
We're ready to go.
All right, take it away.
All right, so next up we have the Matriarch. So when Lillian Corvus was extraneous word. Lillian Corvus was a bright, happy child, yet as she grew older, she began to long for power. She wanted to be feared and respected, and began to rebel. She'd write dark poetry, glare at shoppers in the mall, and spent the rest of her time looking for exciting, shiny things in flea markets. It was there that she bought an old feathered masquerade mask from a tiny curiosity shop. Upon donning the mask, she instantly felt a great presence in the sky. She attempted to pull the force towards her, and the sky erupted in a cacophony of caws and shrieks as ravens filled the air. She now controlled the birds of the sky, and Lillian was no more. She was now the Matriarch. Finally, she had the power she'd craved, and she would gain the fear and respect through a reign of terror. Let's listen to the Matriarch's theme now.
And we're back. I can't not play air drums whenever I hear that theme. It's just a thing. What can I say?
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, both Jeremy and I play the drums. So we kind of have a similar thing for rhythm and banging on things to make sound. As you could hear, the approach for this one was a sort of a gothic rock perspective. You may recognize its similarity to a certain popular band in this style. Mm-hmm. And some people were asking about the singer. We recruited Jennifer Clausen. She's a talented graphics designer at Greater Than Games to sing the role of the Matriarch. And I think you'll all agree that she did an awesome job.
She did indeed. That's the other thing is I can't not play air drums, and I also can't not try to sing along with the oh. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and that was the first time we tried to have vocals in it, but Greater Than Games specifically said no lyrics.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, for this style, sort of that big operatic, held notes with lots of vibrato makes a lot of sense.
So just FYI, your video has frozen. So you might want to turn it off and turn it back on.
Okay.
You're in a funny looking position. But you're still talking and I can still hear you, but I don't know if Skype screwed it up or what. But anywho, I'm actually really glad that you brought up drums and rhythm, because that leads us right into the next one really well, which we'll comment on afterward. But why don't you tell us what we're listening to next?
Sure. So next up we have the Pike Industrial Complex. So the Pike Industrial Complex existed to push industrial progress to its limits. It processed power and chemical experimentation in order to develop and synthesize the most advanced biomedical serums and elixirs. The goal was to revolutionize the human experience through technology. However, as time progressed and the plant was passed on to the next of kin, testing became more harmful for the subjects and experiments that left Rook City in worse and worse shape. Let's listen to the Pike Industrial Complex now.
All right, so yes, that was the Pike Industrial Complex, and I'm very excited that people in the chat were working out the same thing that I was working out when I was cutting this together, because I'd always noticed that it kind of felt a little off kilter, but I'd never actually counted it out before. And yes, it goes 6/8, 7/8, 6/8, 8/8. And so it kind of makes you feel like you can't quite ever catch the beat, which actually plays to a lot of both mine and Jean-Marc's sensibilities when it comes to music we just listen to for fun.
Yeah, so for this one, the approach was to take a mostly percussive approach, and even at that, most of the percussion is unconventional. So it uses a lot of objects rather than specific instruments, mostly of metals and plastics and things like that. So examples of the instruments used are plastic jugs, spray cans, metal barrels, pipes, things like that. That's to like simulate the materials that would be on hand, and the rest of it's used to represent the actual materials produced by the factory, such as chemical vats and mutated creatures and all that stuff. And I thought if we're going for a very percussive approach, percussion lends itself very well to changing meters and stuff like that. And I found that it just kind of added a certain element of interest to the music that I didn't have when it was just in a straight meter. So I pretty much kept that 6 7 6 7 6 8 feel through the whole thing to kind of give it that angle. And it's actually one of the ones that I like going back to pretty often. I just, I did a lot of percussion ensemble in university and stuff like that. So it just kind of, it has a certain element of nostalgia for me almost. So.
Very cool. All right, so let's talk about making the Pike Industrial Complex. Obviously, Jen, you talked a little bit about it in that we sort of built Rook City, the city, around the actual complex, and that it's all in one sort of thing. But what did what was it to capture the Pike Industrial that was different from capturing Rook City, for instance?
Well, there was a big focus on making sure there were enough rats in the scene.
That is true.
that was kind of an important element. And then that there was like strange glowing smoke and stuff coming out of pipes.
I will say one of the things I did notice when I was cutting this together is that the one vat color that we don't actually have represented that's on the decks but is not in our environments is the blue from the trisolvent vat. We have the yellow and we have the green, but there is still that blue, which we never really did, which I think makes sense because, this environment doesn't feel very blue sky-y, and I think the blue might have not fit very well, but I was noticing that when I was putting it together.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no explanation for that.
That's quite all right. Yeah, someone said Pike Industrial Complex entirely manned by rats.
Maybe a blue vat will magically appear in the environments at some point in the future. Who knows?
Maybe.
Stranger things have happened. But that was, rats and bats and, making it look like an industrial, making it look very industrial, but also like it was like part of the Rook City environment.
Yeah, part of the Rook City aesthetic, but I think also one of the things I remember, if I remember right when we were discussing that, was that Rook City should be like mostly outside because it's a city, whereas the Pike Industrial was mostly inside because it's like you're sort of in the various factories and warehouses and stuff.
Yep, that's true. And in the actual Unity project, like you're actually inside the buildings in Rook City.
Very cool. Yeah, so if it ever comes time to do a first-person shooter in Rook City, we're halfway there.
Yeah, we actually are halfway there.
Migrant P asks, how agonizing was it to decide which rat pack to use?
I definitely looked at some rat packs. I think
very early on we decided not to use the one that had Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra. But beyond that, it was definitely a head scratcher.
Yeah, I think the rat pack I was pretty satisfied with the rat pack we used.
I agree. They can't sing as well as the other rat pack, but I think they convey Pike Industrial pretty well.
But fortunately, we have jean-marc to add it to create music for the game. So.
All right, so cool. Again, if anybody has any questions like Migrant P, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. So I think that leaves us with only one more villain for this expansion. Does that sound about right to you, Jean-Marc?
Yeah, so the last villain from the Rook City line is Spite. So Jonathan Jack Donovan was a prolific serial killer, murdering 43 people in Rook City before finally being brought to justice. But after being sentenced to execution, he was offered a deal. If he would volunteer as a test specimen for a secret project by Pike Industries, he would instead be granted life in prison instead of execution. Donovan agreed to the experiments, but unlike most test subjects who died as a result of them, he flourished, gaining terrible strength and power by the chemicals in his system. He escaped the lab and now, as Spite, continues killing more and more victims and breaks into the Pike laboratories to ingest corrupting substances. Let's listen to Spite's theme now.
All right.
Yeah.
So that was Spite, and before Jean-Marc tells you a little bit more about it, I did want to mention a couple things about it. Number one, that last piece of art that you saw fading out into the background there, Adam has said he thinks that is possibly the most disgusting piece of art he's ever drawn. Now, it may have changed now that he's doing stuff for Oblivion, but I remember distinctly when he actually brought up the video game. I was with him at a PAX, and we were looking at Spite, and he saw that. He was like, oh, God, did I draw that? That's like the most gross thing I've ever drawn. So, yeah, there was that. And then there's a lot of questions in the chat about why an ice cream truck?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, a lot of people seem disturbed by the Spite for theme, or by the theme for Spite, but that's sort of the point.
Yeah.
Because he is a serial killer, and a very grotesque one at that. So at first he seems like he just might be a confused victim of drugs and needs of help, and that's sort of depicted on some of the cards. But in actuality, he's a remorseless killer. So that's why the beginning of the piece starts with those dizzying Glock sounds, but turns into sort of an abrupt, dark, dangerous mess towards the end. And in terms of why Ice Cream Truck, so it has those high bell sounds at the beginning that I was just talking about, but we wanted to make sure to distinguish it from the music box sound that the Dreamer was going to have when Shattered Timelines comes along. So we wanted this to be more like, creepy ice cream truck driver.
Yeah, and I think that, the ice cream
kind of
truck...
distinguish that.
Yeah, and the ice cream truck sort of has a bit of a zeitgeist around it of the serial killer, like the killer who's trying to lure children away. And obviously, I don't know that he exclusively kills children, but he certainly has killed his share of them.
Are we still on?
I think so, yeah. Why? Do you not hear me? Jean-Marc's Skype has been acting funny. Oh, we lost Jean-Marc. Okay, well, I'll finish talking about that real quick. But basically, there's that sort of zeitgeist about the ice cream truck pulling children along. And actually, I know a lot of people talk about how playing against Spite provides a lot of hard choices. Like, if you play it thematically and really feel as if you are a hero, it's tough. Spite is potentially one of the toughest villains in the entire game, because you oftentimes have to make the decision to sacrifice a victim in order for the greater good, and that is obviously not very heroic. So those games can be really tough. Are you back with us, Jean-Marc? Can you hear me again?
Spite got me!
Yeah, Spite came along and stole away our Jean-Marc. So now, remember, there is another Spite out there. It's from a little bit later in the timeline, and if you listen to the Gloomweaver letters page this week, you know a little bit more about that. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the Agent of Gloom?
So, in the storyline, Spite eventually dies, both from drug overdose and from a slice of serrated steel going through his head. So the demon known as Gloomweaver felt Jack Donovan's hatred and made the serial killer an offer to continue his work. So Spite, Agent of Gloom, is now a vassal of Gloomweaver, hunting victims to bring about a new era of true gloom. If he succeeds in this task, that covenant will preserve him through all manner of atrocities. However, even if he fails, his body and soul are forfeit to the dread of Gloomweaver, who will have a new form, one way or the other. Let's listen to Spite, Agent of Gloom now.
Yes, so that was the Agent of Gloom, the alternate spite, the demo spite, the variant spite, as it were. So obviously we sort of permuted and perverted the spite theme to make that, as perverted and permuted as it already was. So what was the process there?
Yeah, so the approach for this one was basically to take Spite's theme, but kind of hold it together with sounds from Gloomweaver's theme, which was a lot of like ominous cult chanting and stuff like that. So this is sort of the mirror of the story behind Spite Agent of Gloom. So I remember originally having trouble getting the choirs and things to sound right in this one, and I actually had to kind of bring them down and kind of cover them with other instruments because it was too janky, for lack of better words, like like it didn't.
Interesting.
It didn't have that flow to it that I was really trying to go for, and that was just sort of a limitation of what I was working with at the time. But you know, I think it worked out, and yeah, so that's the Spite Agent of Gloom variant music.
Yeah, so that brings us to the end of the world. No, that brings us to the end of the characters from Rook City. But of course, it wouldn't be a Handelabra listening party without one or two surprises. So I think we might reach into Jean-Marc's mind here and pull out a little something special for the super fans who decided to come here in the middle of a workday and listen to us. So I'm not even going to give this any intro. I'm just going to hit play and see what you guys think. Yes, so there's your surprise. A lot of you are saying, I wasn't expecting this. Yeah, as you know, part of the Kickstarter unlocked hero themes for all of Season 1 heroes. And so Jean-Marc came to me and said, hey, since we're doing that Rook City listening party, I could maybe fast-track one of the Rook City heroes. And I was like, yeah, I think that that is a wonderful, wonderful idea. So tell us about Mr. Fixer, Jean-Marc.
Yeah. So yeah, just in reference to what you just said, so I was like, yeah, so it could either be the Wraith, Mr. Fixer, Expatriate, and after talking with Craven Games, we decided to do Mr. Fixer's theme. So H.R. Walker used to run a martial arts school for kids, most of whom had never paid for their classes. But about 25 years ago, a group of his students were killed for standing up for themselves, gunned down by drug dealers for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. HR closed down the school the next day, telling students the only way to stay safe is to not fight back. Now Slim just runs an auto shop, and everyone in the neighborhood knows it's the best place to get your car fixed. However, the pushers and dealers are expanding their territory, and there's been a rash of criminal activity on Slim's block. And HR's don't fight back policy won't last for long. So of all the pieces of music in Sentinels, this is probably the most calming and reflective, especially at the beginning. And this is due to Mr. Fixer's regimented meditation and overall internal calm. And then a little bit into that, the tool percussion kicks in, sort of representing his auto mechanic occupation. And then finally, halfway through, he leaves his shop to enter the streets of Rook City, and the theme takes on more of an urban theme and kind of reflects more on the Black Fist days, which, if you are familiar with the Sentinels lore, was sort of his earlier incarnation. However, you'll notice that it still has, even when he's out on the streets of Rook City, it still has an internal calmness about it, despite all the sounds of the crime and the shouts and stuff going on around him. And as some observant people have pointed out in the chat, there are certain sections of the track that are a deliberate reference to the opening saxophone line of Rook City. This is kind of to show that the city is a part of his blood, but that particular line is reinterpreted in a more calm and heroic fashion.
Yeah, I remember that was a specific one of those conversations, just to go back to what we were talking about earlier about the process between you and Christopher and Adam, because I remember specifically when they were like, hey, we should totally have some of this, Rook City feel, and it was like, well, you guys are sort of chatting back and forth, like, yeah, but the saxophone is really, it's just not quite right for him, it's the wrong instrumentation, it's not going to work right with what we're doing, and you were kind of like, you know what? Let me think about it for a minute and see what I can do. And of course, you sort of disappeared into your little musical black box and came up with something that, if you're listening carefully, it's there, but it doesn't beat you over the head with it, and it's really just, yeah. In fact, David, our newest team member, has said that this is his favorite piece of music that Jean-Marc has made for the game yet. And I'm sure a couple of you out there probably agree. It is absolutely gorgeous. In terms of the gorgeousness, to me, it's a toss-up between this and Temple of Zhulong. I think it could just be that one's longer, but that one to me is like the ultimate meditative, just quiet piece of beauty. So. Cool. All right, so I guess that's the end of the world. No, it's not. Come on, you guys want another surprise, don't you? We're not leaving until I hear if you want another surprise. So now we have to wait 30 seconds for them to tell us if they want another surprise. Yes, I think I'm not going to wait. You guys are going to get another surprise because that's what we do for you here at Handelabra Games. Those of you who have been watching Sentinels Live know that we've been working tirelessly to finish the next expansion, Villains of the Multiverse. And as Jean-Marc has already mentioned, there are 10 new team mode villains. And actually, as one of you also just recently guessed in the chat there, we figured we might as well let you hear one of their themes today. And since we're in Rook City, seemed like a good time to sort of stick with the theme and maybe show you a little bit about what the Operative is doing when she's not hanging out under the chairman. So let's give a quick listen to the Operative's team theme, villain team scene theme on the stream. Holy Bleem. I drew a blank. Anyway, here's the Operative's theme. All right, so there's a quick sneak peek at one of the villain themes coming up in Villains of the Multiverse. That is the Operative. Tell us a bit about it, Jean-Marc.
Sure. So, after working for most of her life under the chairman, a mortal injury left the Operative on her deathbed. Her body was sent from Rook City to the temple of a mystic known as Zhulong, where he brought Sophia back from the brink of death, but at the cost of her servitude. She now has to repay her life debt as an agent of Zhulong. So musically, the Operative's version of the villain team victory music is a mixture of the Temple of Zhulong music and the Chairman's theme, which is her origins. But this one definitely leans more on the side of Zhulong, because that's sort of her place of servitude at the moment. So.
Indeed. So there's a question in the chat. Will it be difficult to maintain a uniqueness to the theme since they need to meld together with the other themes? What do you think about that, Jean-Marc? I know I have my opinion about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely trickier. Like, I can't slow it down. I can't really drastically change the chord patterns. There's a lot of things that I can't modify. So I try and leverage the things that I can. So especially changing up instrumentation. That's the biggest thing that I am able to do. And then there's certain little moments and pockets in there where I let one of the parts do its own thing a little bit. So in this one, you'll notice like that, like none of the other themes do that part there. And that's because I left a little bit of pocket of space there for the accompaniment to do something different. So there's little tricks like that to try and make them still sound a little bit unique from each other, but still have the ability to mix together.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So my thoughts about that is, despite the fact that you can't actually change the meter or the speed, I found that you're pretty good at finding tricks to make it seem like you have. So like, if you listen to Ermine's version of the theme and then you listen to Friction's version of the theme separately, you'll swear that Friction's is faster. Because you used fun little tricks of the rhythm, maybe double timing it or whatever it is, and it really does feel faster. Whereas Ermine's is much slower and sort of swanky and jazzy or whatever. But then when you put them together, you can tell they actually are the same speed, but they really give a whole third idea where it's like they're not fast or slow now that they're mixed together. And so obviously that'll be even more so once we have 10 more villain themes, or 9 more now because people have heard the 10th. To all mix together, so it should be fun. We have a question: on a scale of 1 to Chuck Berry, how 50s is Greaser's theme going to be?
It will be as Chuck Berry as I can make it. Again, fitting within the scheme.
Right.
The sort of the structural layout confinements, but I don't know. It kind of feels like. When I read interviews with composers, which I often do, of the 8-bit especially era, they said they keep talking about all the constraints they had on the music they composed, but how they would leverage the things that they had a bit of control over, or they would do things that you couldn't do in real life because now you're doing it on a computer, or they would find tricks of making 3 voices sound like 6, and so it kind of feels like doing that, like having sort of constraints that I have to adhere to, and so trying to, in this case, trying to make it sound rockabilly within this structure. So we'll see.
So Hank Wright asks, how many villain themes for Villains of the Multiverse are already done? Actually, I would say technically, and maybe Jean-Marc can correct me, none of them are actually done. This one isn't done yet. It's just as good as we could get it for the listening party. So there's still going to be some tweaks and some fixes and some mastering to go into all of it, and plus it obviously has to get picked apart into its component parts and then put into the engine. I have heard at least 5 of them at this point, at least your working copies of them. I know that Jean-Marc has definitely worked up versions for Citizens Hammer and Anvil, Misinformation. Did I hear the one for La Capitane yet? I don't remember if I heard that one yet.
Yep.
Yeah, La Capitane. Yeah, so there's a couple. And, obviously he's constantly working on all of them. We're at the point now where, on a code perspective, the vast majority of Villains is done and into testing. It's actually in beta testing now. And, we're still waiting on some content from Granite Games. So, like artwork, you'll notice that the Operative video here did not have the Operative artwork from Villains yet, because we're still waiting on that. They're in a bit of a crunch for Oblivion, so we're sort of giving them their space a bit. But we've got artwork coming from Adam. We've still got some writing content coming from Christopher. Obviously, there's some very interesting bugs that come up in this new expansions. There's a lot of testing still to be done, and Jean-Marc is now spending a bunch of his time on the music. So that's sort of from a development perspective where we are with Villains. So, all right. Did you have any closing thoughts about this expansion, Jennifer? Since this is our last retro viewing party, everything moving forward will be future. So,
yeah. But we have some exciting stuff for the future.
We do. Indeed.
Yeah. Well, I don't really have much to say except thank you to everyone who has joined us today.
Indeed.
It's always a good time.
It is always a good time. Yeah, and again, like if you just joined us or if you missed the beginning of this and you want to do it, it will be posted up on YouTube. Now that we have Krista, it'll be potentially up by the end of the day. But we'll have to see. Maybe tomorrow morning is a more realistic goal for that. Jean-Marc, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody that made the retro listening party possible. Obviously, aside from us just putting it on, it was a part of a stretch goal in our Kickstarter.
Well, a squish goal.
Squish goal. It was a squish goal. And the fact that we're wrapping up the retro listening parties today shows that not only did we hit it, but that we are more than happy to fulfill any squish or stretch promises that have been made, and we hope you enjoyed listening to sort of more of a commentary on stuff you've already heard as opposed to new stuff, with the exception of some surprises here and there. So,
indeed. So I will just echo that. Thank you everybody for joining us. There was one more question. Will there ever be Season 2 hero themes? I don't know. We'll see. We would love for there to be, but we have not promised that in any way, shape, or form. As has become our sort of custom with these listening parties, with the cool surprise stuff, we will play both of them again at the end before leading out. But we won't come back. We'll just play them and then fade out. So thanks everybody for coming. You've been watching Sentinels Live. Remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, here on Twitch. Tell your friends. This will be posted later today or early tomorrow morning for you to send to anybody who wasn't quick enough to get here live. And don't forget to watch our other shows. We have shows Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern for all of those shows. And we'd love for you guys to, come and check out more Sentinel stuff and help spread the word. I think that's going to be it. So we'll listen here to the Operative, followed again immediately by Mr. Fixer, and then we're going to call it a day. So thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon, great evening, and get out there and save the multiverse.
Woohoo!
bye.
Bye.